my second attempt at the review of The Return by Rachel Harrison, because I felt like I left out some important points from my first review, and even though I didn't like this book, there are some really good aspects to it, and I don't think I was clear enough in my first review. So, to be fair to Harrison, I wanted to do this again because I do respect her. I respect all writers. Sometimes it's easy to forget that writers are people when you read a book that you thought could have been better. The Return was actually another book club book, so this is going to show you how long it's been since I've read this book, because I read this book in October of last year, and if I hadn't already had my Spooktober planned out already, I totally would have included it. So, yes, The Return is a horror novel. I kind of like to be scared, I kind of don't like to be scared, and that is what I thought Harrison did really well. Was she created an incredible atmosphere. I did think it started off slow, and I wasn't always sure about the main character, but I could see how Harrison was constantly trying to plant seeds of doubt and seeds of something's not right here. And so in the end, it culminated into something great. Although I think what dragged it down was it was boring. There were large chunks of the novel that I didn't care about. What caught my attention the most was when we got into the creepiness. Want to know what that creepiness is? Well, good, because I'm about to tell you. It revolves around 4 friends, one of which disappears. And 2 years later, she shows up and nobody knows where she's been. She doesn't remember what happened. But in an effort to reconnect, they plan a weekend at this real kitsch hotel, this real Instagram-worthy type of place, and things just don't go as planned. Who are the girls? Elise, Julie, who is the one that went missing, May, and then there's Molly. My favorite is Molly because I connected to her the most. I thought she was the most enjoyable. She was the funniest. On some levels, I connected with her the most because, girl, really outspoken. I enjoy speaking my piece, if you haven't noticed. However, after hearing certain things that Harrison had to say about where the novel came from, I saw a lot of myself in Elise. And that's because this novel is about friendship. It originated from this idea of, when you're in college or high school, you form these really close friendships, and then over time, they start to deteriorate for one reason or another. Maybe you're single, they get married, they have kids, maybe their jobs go in different directions than your jobs, maybe your life isn't turning out the way you thought, and then you compare yourself to your friends, but they're still your friends. However, they're not the friends you knew. That is the aspect that I hadn't picked up on until I listened to Harrison talk about where this novel came from. But then in the aftermath, I was like, wow, I really like that. We know I hate the message. I hate the theme. The thing about, well, it's not just a book that I can enjoy. It's a book that I'm supposed to get something from, which I think I didn't pick up on it, and a lot of it was boring to me because it is more literary, and that's what literary is all about. Whereas I enjoy commercial fiction because commercial fiction can still have those elements, but it is more about enjoying the novel than about the deeper meaning. But The Return is really about friendship. And so in that, I found that Elise and I had a lot in common because she's pretty insecure in her status amongst this group of girls. With 4, they essentially paired off. So May and Molly may have been a little bit closer. Elise and Julie were definitely closer. They met, they were college roommates and blah, blah, blah. But even then, Elise was like, I have to do certain things to ensure that I'm still part of this group. I cannot be late because if I'm late, maybe they'll do things without me. Maybe they'll leave me behind. So it's just those little things that we've all done in our friendships, all those insecurities that we do see in ourselves, even if we don't see them at first. Eventually, you do sit back from a friendship and say, where do I belong in this friendship? Oh my goodness. Elise, going along with that, is kind of the insecure one of the group. And so even though I did see a lot of myself in her, I didn't like her. I thought she was kind of whiny, and I didn't understand why she let herself get where she is. Although, who am I to talk? But the deal with Elise is they all went to school at Columbia. Now somehow she has wound up in Buffalo, which is upstate New York of some sort. I think I should have done my geography homework, and I didn't. But then May has come from family. Of course, she came from family. We all come from family. May has come from a wealthy family, so money is no object to her. So she's able to live the life she wants to live in New York City. Molly has gone off to California and lived the glamorous life there. And then Julie has kind of jet-setted. She's gone and she's done her traveling. Elise sees all the things her friends are doing, and she just compares herself to them, and then she looks at her own situation and she doesn't like it. And so my problem is, why doesn't she get out of it? Because the deal with Elise is that she doesn't have a good relationship with her parents. They had her young, they split up. The mother was an alcoholic, so she ends up dying in a drunk driving accident. The father ends up marrying some other woman, having this other family, doesn't seem to want much to do with Elise. Eventually, she reaches out to him. He does support her a little bit financially in terms of school, until she engages in an affair with her professor. And then this prompts her to drop out, and that severs ties with her dad. But the affair is then what leads her to move to Buffalo, because that's where his family lives. He's a married man. Columbia, I don't know how far, a couple hours away. He lives in the city during the week. He would go home on the weekends. At some point, he convinced her to move to Buffalo. I still don't understand why he wanted her to move to Buffalo, because if he's still teaching, I don't know, maybe it was the summer. I did a lot of skimming. I really did, because with literary fiction, it's heavy. Like, the writing is really heavy. It bogs you down, and it made me sleepy. Like, that is something I always know. I'm reading literary fiction when I'm reading it, and I just need to take a nap. So it made me sleepy. It made my head hurt. I just felt like something was weighing on me, and the words weren't making sense, and what she wanted to say wasn't making sense. So anyways, I skipped a lot because I just didn't care. She goes there, and eventually she realizes this is life, and he's not gonna leave these people. She gets really stalkerish because she wants to break up with him. But first, she wants to know all about his family. And so she's trying to get information out of him, and he's like, why do you want to know about my wife and kids? So she breaks into their home, strolls around, and then she realizes, nah, I shouldn't be here. So she leaves, and then she breaks up with him. But she still stays in Buffalo, in a job she hates, in an apartment she hates. And so this is what I don't get about her. I feel the situation in which you aren't where you want to be. But she sounds like she's entirely capable of moving on, yet she's stayed. And then there's Molly, who, as I said, is the wealthy one. And I didn't quite understand her, because this whole weekend thing, Julie shows back up. She stays out of the public eye, which is very out of character for her, because growing up, she had wanted to be famous. She wanted to be a singer. She wanted to be an actress. She wanted to be in front of the camera. Yet now she doesn't want anything to do with it. And this extends to seeing her friends. She makes excuses not to have them come to her home. So Molly comes up with this great idea. I forget what she does. It's something with fashion. She had been part of this photo shoot at this hotel, and because she thought it was so kitsch and so Instagram worthy that it would be super fun for the girls to go there, despite the fact that it is super expensive. This is the problem that Elise initially has, because she's like, I can't afford that, and this is again something I don't understand, because it's that mindset of, if I don't go, they're gonna leave me behind, which I do understand. But she literally cannot afford to go to this hotel, but she decides to do it anyways. And then Molly does offer to finance some of it for her, and she rejects it, which I don't get. Like, if you do not have the money in the bank, why are you saying no to the person who will make it easier for you? On that token, what I don't get about Molly is, if these girls are such good friends, I mean, I know they've kind of separated a little bit and grown apart a little bit, but if they have this close bond, why would she propose they go to a place that not everybody can afford? That, to me, is not caring. It's not something that a thoughtful friend would do. Even though she does offer in the end, I thought maybe if she's the kind of friend that she's supposed to be, she would have offered up front. So that's Molly. We really don't get much of her, except she has really bad taste in partners, but seems to have found a really great one this time around. She, of the four girls, I thought she was the least developed. She was the most background of them all, which is unfortunate because she had really interesting characteristics. And then there's Molly, as I said, who is my favorite. She's incredibly outspoken. But what made her so interesting, or made her the most unique, was the fact that apparently at some point in her childhood or adolescence, she battled cancer and she lost her leg. And so this is something that just wasn't explored, and I think it's because it's the whole literary fiction aspect where we rarely get told anything straight up. Everything has to be inferred. There are things dropped here and there and everywhere, but I thought that was such an interesting characteristic for her, yet it is completely underplayed, barely explained. So she is the character in the novel because Julie doesn't want to talk about anything. You know, despite the fact that she can't remember, she doesn't want people asking her about it. But Molly is the one who keeps coming to Elise and saying, talk to her, talk to her, talk to her. Something's not right. We need to talk to her. Please say something, because you're the closest. Like, please, like, she's brash. She's willing to say what needs to be said to whomever it needs to be said. She added a good bit of lightheartedness to a really dark, heavy novel. I didn't mind the darkness. I did mind the heaviness. So I enjoyed Molly bringing us up out of that pit a little bit. And then there's Julie. Julie also didn't have the greatest childhood. Her mom was really bad at choosing men, and this had some sort of an effect on Julie. And so I'm a little confused as to what kind of character she is, or what kind of person she is, because Elise is something of a wallflower. Julie, it's like she has split personality, where she can be a wallflower, but she's also a force to be reckoned with. And I don't know, maybe that is something that everybody encounters in their personal life, where you can be an introvert. Like, I am an extroverted introvert. At heart, I'm an introvert. Put me in the right situation, I'm an extrovert. Get me around people I know, situations I'm comfortable with, I am an extrovert. Maybe that's the deal with Julie, where she is an introvert like Elise, but you put her in the right situation and she's an extrovert. Right before she disappears, she just marries this dude. It wasn't actually a legally binding marriage, so I don't really get it. But she marries him so that her mom could see her get buried before she died. Here's something of a spoiler. She starts to regret it. She's like, why did I marry this guy? The tipping point came because when they got married, they said, all right, these are going to be our responsibilities. Her responsibility was, or one of her responsibilities was dishes. And it bothered the dickens out of her that her husband, who always had a candy bar after dinner, could not put his candy wrapper in the trash. He would put it in the garbage disposal, which, that would bother me too, because it's really not hard to put your candy wrapper in the trash. But eventually, she just loses it. She goes to him and says, hey, I want to go hiking. And this was something that they had planned to do together, and it was kind of a test. Like, are you going to come with me or are you not? He fails the test. He says, oh, that's great. You know, I'll get you some gear. This is the big spoiler, because throughout the novel, she keeps saying, I have no idea what happened to me. In the end, with our big reveal, she straight up says, I lied. I knew exactly what happened to me. She's hiking, and she's just kind of sulking. You know, she's just throwing herself a pity party. She thinks she's seeing things, like there's something else there. I got lost for a minute. There was just a lot of words. Go figure. Words in a book. But there were a lot of words. I didn't really care about them, so I skipped. But she realizes she's not seeing something. There is something there. And this something is playing a cat and mouse game with her. So she's running away from it, and eventually she realizes she's never gonna get away. This creature, I guess it can have a physical form, but it can also be like ephemeral or just a shadow or something. This creature finally tackles her, and it's leaning over her, and it's got its mouth about to cover her head. And the next thing she knows, she wakes up buried alive. She gets out of her grave, and I guess the intent wasn't necessarily to kill her so much as to transform her. There is a whole community of this creature living in these woods. So she's going around hanging out with her new people, and then she realizes, you know what? I need Elise. I miss Elise. And this is when she reappears on her front porch, and her husband's like, what in the world? Now we are back in the present tense, in which Elise gets to the hotel first. She checks in, and eventually May and Molly show up. And this is something I didn't quite understand. I thought there's gonna be more to it. But they're showing each other their rooms. And evidently, Elise was given the wrong room. She was given this hideous teal room rather than this more gothic inspired room, because she likes gothic novels like Jane Eyre and things like that. May makes a face, and Harrison makes a pointed comment as to, well, that's not the room you're supposed to have. And so I was waiting for why that it was important. And maybe, again, it was one of those subliminal messages, one of those things I was expected to figure out on my own. I didn't. And I'm unapologetic about it, because literary fiction is heavy enough. I don't want to have to figure out everything on my own. I tell the front desk girl, when our friend gets here, give us a call. They never get the call, but then this really creepy knocking comes on the door. And turns out it's Julie, and they are astonished by her appearance, because something's not right with her. She's emaciated, something's going on with her skin, her teeth are wrong, like there is something wrong with her. Things just keep getting weirder. For one, her appearance, it changes. Sometimes she'll show up looking more normal, and then other times she shows up looking worse than ever. So here's a spoiler. Something is wrong with staffing at this hotel. We keep getting little snippets of weirdness, which, if you're me, you're paying attention to the little snippets. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, the front desk girl is gone, and somebody has taken her. Like, she has been abducted, and it's probably Julie, because Julie's acting all funny. What we learned about Julie is she was a vegetarian or a vegan. In any case, she didn't eat meat. But now she eats meat. And not only that, but she eats raw meat. In retrospect, I'm wondering, when she feeds, does it somehow feed her appearance? I kind of would have liked there have been to be more of a de-evolution of her. I liked that she shows up and she looks wrong. I do like that. But I kind of wish she hadn't looked so wrong, that maybe she could have just been emaciated. Because there was this subplot of her having an eating disorder throughout her life. So I'm like, okay, I guess I wouldn't mind if maybe she had just been underfed, malnourished, And then eventually everything else starts to creep in to show that she is going downhill. But I thought it was really confusing in the midst of my reading as to what was going on with her physical appearance. Because on top of that, her personality, I mean, she could always be blunt. But there's blunt and then there's rude. And then this was something I caught on to, where there are just things that even in a close-knit group you don't talk about. And she was bringing these things up, even though etiquette dictates you don't do it. You know something weird is going on. This is what starts prompting May and Molly to come to Elise to say, please talk to her. Something's not right. There's this instance, which I'm still confused about, and I have my guesses. They're probably wrong. But because we're not given answers, I can only go with my assumptions. Nothing goes right on this weekend. One of the events that they do is a crepe making class, or crepe, whatever you want to call it. There is actually a difference between the two. We're going to say crepe just because we want to feel very Parisienne. All the girls are there making their crepes, and they say, let's have a contest. Let's judge them and see whose is best. And so Elise is going through and she's trying them, and she gets to Julie's and she's like, don't do it. Like, inside her head, there is something putting up a stop sign telling her not to do it. I wish I'd known why. Yeah, weird things had happened, but I didn't feel like this quite slotted in as a reasonable reaction. Anyways, May comes through and she just takes a bite. Then May ends up getting really sick, like food poisoning sick. This is when the book is picking up steam and even weirder things are happening. But what I didn't understand is, what was it in this crepe that made May so sick? If they're all using the same ingredients, it's not like Julie grabbed a hunk of raw meat and put it in her crepe. Did she excrete something in her body? I don't know what it was that made May so sick. I don't know what it was that repulsed Elise so much that she could not put a bite in her mouth. On top of that, why did Julie put anything in her crepe in the first place? Except that we're still trying to keep that creep factor going. Anyways. I completely lost my train of thought. I could not figure out where I was supposed to go next. We're just gonna move on to something else. In terms of Julie being some other creature, I enjoyed that to no end. Usually when you have a situation like this where someone goes missing, when they return, there's something not right. Like, it's usually not them, it's somehow somebody pretending to be them, or it's a creature that has just put the face on. But what I liked in The Return, which isn't this just a really great cover? I agree, and it matches my dress. I liked that it was Julie, but it wasn't Julie. Sort of was a creature that put her face on, but it was actually Julie. So all the little test moments where they're trying to figure out, is it Julie, is it not Julie, she passes them all. Because it is her, she has just been transformed and has come back to get Elise because that's her BFF. That was refreshing to have a twist on the missing comeback. In terms of the monster, and this was something that had been brought up in discussion with Harrison about, she's just a friend, that she's not the same person she used to be. So I did like that representation of how friendships change. How, yes, Julie and Elise were the best of friends for years and years and years, but circumstances pulled them apart and they changed and they did different things. And so when they come back together, they're still friends, but they don't really know each other. But in that, I was a little disappointed with the explanation and the development of the monster aspect. Itchy. As I said, the front desk clerk goes missing. And then we hear things about how there's a smell in the hallway. And then we hear more whisperings about being understaffed. and then all of a sudden the hotel is closing down because they just don't have enough staff to keep it open. My first question, which I know I'm supposed to have suspended belief for the novel, I'm thinking there's gotta be at least 10 people or something running this hotel. Do they not have ancillary staff? This front desk girl cannot work 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. So was Julie killing off every new person that they brought in? Honestly, my impression was there were only like 3 staff members at this hotel. There was the front desk girl, there was the hotel manager, and then there was the guy that served them at the bar. Literally, this is not a small hotel. I kind of wanted more, and I know Harrison did this on purpose. She didn't really want to steep the monster in something so realistic because she didn't want it to take away from her message. Anywho, literary fiction, what are you gonna do? But there was a developmental aspect that could have made the book scarier if we'd gotten more of where is the staff? Why are things going wrong? Why is there blood dripping from the vent? Even, and this was something I do and don't like. So as I said in the beginning, I wasn't quite sure about Elise and her headspace. I thought she was a normal person who just made bad decisions and didn't know how to get out of her slump. But then she gets to the hotel and she starts to see things. We start to get this idea that maybe she's got some psychiatric problems. But what we learn is she was actually seeing things. This was Julie in this shadow form stalking her. That aspect where I liked that Elise wasn't actually seeing things, I didn't think that it was explained very well. Especially because it was like a hit and miss. Like, it would appear and then it was gone, and then it would appear and then it was gone, and it was here and then here, but it wasn't consistent enough for me to really start to question what's going on. I see this as like The Shining meets Rosemary's Baby. You definitely see the Shining aspects of something's wrong with the hotel when you get those moments, but they're not strung together. They're isolated incidents. And because they're so isolated, it's just not entirely effective in being something that, for me, needs to be there. It doesn't need to be pointed out if it's not going to be made bigger. We finally get to the end in which the hotel is shutting down. It felt really rushed for me. I thought that the build-up was kind of slow, and then the climax was really fast. The manager comes to Elise and says, "We're closing down. We don't have enough staff to run the hotel." Elise is running around, and I think she's trying to find her friends. Yes, she's trying to find her friends because May is sick. The manager is like, "Hey, just go. I'll get your suitcase. I'll take your suitcase to the front." Elise gets to the front. She finds May and Molly, and Molly can't even stand on her own 2 feet, and they're talking. And then the girls get this tone and this look on their face, and they're like, "Please just leave with us." And Elise, I don't know, it was all overwhelming, and I had to reread this part like 3 times to really understand what was going on. Essentially, Julie shows up partially monsterized, and this is when I wished that she'd had more of a de-evolution, because I didn't understand why she chose at this point. Like, she didn't completely transform into a monster. She's still partially Julie, partially monster. If you've killed everybody off and everybody knows there's a monster here, well, everybody isn't me, why do you still have to be in Julie form? Because we get the idea. You're Julie. They're like, just don't turn around, come with us. And Elise keeps saying, no, 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 I need to get my suitcase. I need to wait for my suitcase. I think that's what it was. She kept putting up a fight about why she wasn't gonna leave with them right then and there. So they leave her. She knows it's Julie behind her. She knows this presence is Julie. And then she turns around and sees the monstrous form, and they sit and have a little heart-to-heart. Elise confronts her about things, and Julie's like, well, I came back for you. I love you. And that's something else where it was a little ambiguous for me, and I both do and don't like ambiguity. I don't like ambiguity in a literary fiction novel because everything's ambiguous. But I could never quite figure out if there was a romance between the two girls. Julie says, this is why I came back. I want you to come with me. I want you to enjoy this life. And Elise says, I think not. And so she runs around the hotel trying to get away from Julie. Eventually, she is able to get away from Julie. She escapes to her car, only to realize all of her tires are slashed. She's still able to start the car eventually, but not before Julie forces her way into the passenger seat. The only way to escape is to crash into a tree. And then even then, Julie, her presence is in the surrounding woods. She's blaming Elise for all of her problems because she's saying Elise wasn't there when she needed her. Elise then turns it around on Julie, and she's like, well, you weren't there when I needed you either, and I just want you to let me go, blah, blah, blah. The book ends, and then we kind of have this little epilogue in which the three girls are essentially saying, you know, what if Julie was still here? In this sense, I kind of like the ambiguity. I don't know if it was supposed to be ambiguous, but for me, I started wondering, did Elise live or die? Did Julie eventually turn her into a monster too? It's just like with Julie was able to hold on to enough of her humanity for Elise. So were Elise's friendships enough that she could hold on to her humanity until said time? I don't really know if that's how we're supposed to take it. For me, it was something of a cliffhanger of what's gonna happen with Elise, and maybe that is watching one too many horror movies in which there's always a sequel. The Return, I liked the essence of it. I liked that it was kind of not an allegory, but it was a representation of friendship set at a creepy hotel with a bloodthirsty monster. But I thought it was lacking in terms of interest level. If we'd gotten more of the monster aspect, it really would have done it for me. The moments that I started to engage were the ones where we got more of Julie, where we started to explore why was she acting different? Like, what was going on with her? Sometimes when we got backstory of the girls in general, there was the moment where Elise goes to confront Julie. She's in the room. Oh my gosh, it just reminded me of another moment, which I may or may not talk about. But as I said, the girls had gotten the wrong rooms. So Elise ultimately says, I'm glad I didn't get this room, because it's not really me. It's not Jane Eyre Gothic. It's like Edgar Allan Poe Gothic, and that's not my thing. But she's in this real, heavy red, black, Gothic room, and Julie is just going to town on a bag of beef jerky, and Elise notices glasses on the floor. She knows those glasses belong to that front desk clerk. We essentially get confirmation that the girl's dead and that Julie has something to do with it. And then Elise goes into the hallway, and I think Julie had given her tea. And so it's getting real psychedelic, real LSD vibes here, where she's smelling things, and the world is kind of wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey. If you get that reference, go with me here. There's this great setup and nothing. From there, I'm pretty sure what happens is that Elise goes to bed, she wakes up, she talks to Molly and blah blah blah, and then the rest of the novel unfolds, like rapidly declines. But I wished that we had gotten more about the missing girl. I wish that maybe Elise had stumbled across something else, and because I'm assuming, I think Julie had made her tea and must have spiked it or something. So what was the purpose of her staggering around the hallway if nothing comes from it? This was a great opportunity for really creepy things to happen, and nothing, just nothing. And so and the other moment that I wasn't sure I was gonna to discuss, so all the girls had been in Elise's room. They were, having this good old time and blah, blah, blah. Things kind of get a little weird because Julie says something she's not supposed to. But then Julie goes to the bathroom and she's there forever. I start to skim because nothing was important. Finally, they all leave. Elise goes into the bathroom and it is covered in blood. And this again is when you're getting serious Shining vibes because you don't know if it's psychological or if it's real, and it turns out to be real, which I'm like, that's cool, but nothing. Like, that's when I think it would have been better if it had been psychological, because you continue to question Elise's psychological state. There were just really great moments that make me want to vomit and hide in a closet, but then they just didn't get any deeper. So I didn't hide in my closet, and my lunch stayed where it was supposed to stay. Have a great day. Stay scared. Bye.